This is AfricanPod and I am your host, Philip Nyakbo. My guest today is an 83-year-old businessman and a renowned Australian mining magnate. Born into a family of miners in the historic mining town of Kalgoorlie, Ron Mannes has been described as a legend in the industry by Bill Repard of Australia's Paydirt. I met Ron Mannes at the NewGenGold conference in Perth, where he was introducing his new book titled The Lonely Libertarian, just one of the many books he has written about the history of Australian mining. In this thoughtful conversation, Ron Mannes says the mining industry is by far the most creative of all industries, making Australia an economically significant country in the world.
You go out into the outback, in particular Australia, where there's absolutely nothing. And by combining science and capital and human endeavour, we make discoveries. And from discoveries come townships, come schools and hospitals and what we regard as modern benefits of civilization. And I think the industry has got to be so much to be proud of. At the moment it's under attack from time to time, and it doesn't appear to know how to defend itself and proudly speak of its achievements and how it's a vital part of Australia's future. So I think there's not enough of us focusing on being articulate about this fantastic industry, which is the mainstay of Australia.
And you describe mining as the future of Australia, but it will also be the past, including the present, won't you say?
Oh, very much. But it's not a backward-facing industry. It's forward-facing, and we know we are continually capturing new technologies and new ways of doing things. Just walking around this conference today, this New Generation Gold Conference, I've spent some time at each of the booths, and I'm so fascinated at the new technologies compared with what I was using 20 or 30 years ago. And I must say, I'm not inclined to be envious of anyone, but I'm really envious of the guys running companies today with the ability to tap into all this new technology and make use of it. We thought we were on the leading edge when we're doing all this stuff 30 years ago, because we'd come so far from the people that were doing it 30 years before, but now it's absolutely science at its best.
And given all that you've contributed to the industry, in fact, Bill Repard describes you as a legend in the industry. Isn't it a time for you to just go sit on a couch somewhere at a beach and just, let life go?
I think retirement is a dirty word, and I think that's turning off the lights. And I certainly don't want to turn off the lights. So my life is very much involved with the younger generation, and I've formed 22 years ago. I formed what I call the Mancal Economic Education Foundation, and we've now sent over 2,000 very bright young Western Australians to economic opportunities all around the world, where they study and embed themselves into economic think tanks in other parts of the world. Then they come back to Australia, then they report on what they've seen. In many cases, they've learned so much, things are done better in other countries, but they also come back equally amazed at how well Australia is doing some things even better than other countries. So it gives them a balance. So, you know, we're very good at some things we haven't caught up with. Here's an example. A tiny country called Estonia in Europe. It's we think of it as a Baltic nation. They think of themselves as a Nordic nation. It's only 1.3 million people, a very tiny country, but they are 10 years ahead of the rest of the world on e-commerce and e-everything. They vote electronically. Their politicians don't go into Parliament to vote. They vote on their iPhones. And I've got e-residency for Estonia, which enables me to form a company, do all sorts of transactions in Estonia from my laptop. It's not a form of tax avoidance, but Estonia has got a flat rate tax of 21%. No deductions. There's no such thing as a tax accountant in the whole country. The tax structure is so simple that it's a dream. I think that dream will never come to Australia because of the accounting profession would not welcome simplification of the Tax Act because they are wallowing in the benefits of a complex tax act that we have here. So this is a thing, by travelling and examining different countries, how they do things, we can learn so much of how other companies and countries do things and bring back so many new ideas. The same as our international explorers exploring other countries, they bring back ideas, and Australia benefits from this international intercourse, I call it.
Ron, that's quite a bit of high-tech knowledge in relation to the nation of Estonia. How did you know that, given that you are supposed to be in your retirement years?
Well, a very well-known Estonian who was born in Estonia was Sir Arvi Parbo. He died earlier this year, but he was a mining legend and the chairman of 3 of Australia's leading companies. He was born in Estonia, and then each time he travelled, either as the chairman of Western Mining Corporation or the chairman of BHP or the chairman of Alcoa, when he travelled, he always went via Estonia, his own home country. And he used to tell them, one day you'll break away from communism. These are the things you should do first off as you have an opportunity to break away from communism. And then they did. In 1989, I think 89, that's about right, when they broke away, and they took all the advice that he'd left and given them. He left a series of books. They brought in the first day of democracy in Estonia, they brought in this flat rate tax because Sir Arvi Parbo had told them that's one of the first things they should do. And Arvi Parbo, was a mentor to so many people such as myself in the mining industry. I met him first when I was about 17, and he always took an interest in what we were doing, and he encouraged us so much so that there's a strong Estonian contact, because when Sir Arvi died this year, he was on the front page of all the Estonian newspapers. He was regarded as their roving ambassador.
So look, it is fascinating, and it is just a fact of life that you can't look at someone's face and see their value. And that's the experience I'm having with you, because as far as I was concerned...
I'm not sure whether that's a compliment or an insult. I'm not sure.
Because I'm sitting in this large room in front of a legend, and I'm asking myself, how did I get here? Who brought me here?
And I'm enjoying this too.
So Ron, you did say you've written quite a number of books. And I'm interested in the latest book you've written, and it's the Lonely Libertarian, Turning Ideas into Gold, and then Gold into Ideas. Ron Manus. Tell me about this book.
Philip, it's interesting. I'd written 5 books previously, and then a publisher called Anthony Capello asked me about a year ago. He said, Ron, I'd like you to write a book. about yourself. And I said, Anthony, I did that. I called it Heroic Misadventures, and I published it several years ago. And he said, no, wrong. He said, you were very clever. It looked as though it was a book about you, but it was only about the interesting people that you'd travelled with during your life. And I said, oh, I thought I got away with that. He said, no, we want you to write a book about yourself. Oh, and that was a challenge. So it took me a year to put it together. So this one, I've really broken it up into three parts. One was starting out, and there's a little bit about me there, the early beginnings. We've all got to start somewhere. But I quickly went back into the mode of talking about everyone else, because the people that I've been involved with are an extraordinary range of people, and their talents and their influences on me have been amazing. And I just want to tell people about how lucky I have been to be associated with people like that. So that's the beginning of it all. Then I had something of a dispute with the Australian Taxation Department, because I felt that they were being unreasonable, and that stopped me from effectively working in Australia for 7 years. So I worked overseas on a range of interesting projects, and I talked briefly about that. But the taxation dispute was resolved after 7 years with the help of a tax attorney out of California, who looked at the case and he said, this can't be solved using the law, because the law with respect to prospecting and taxation is ambiguous. And he said, it's a constitutional matter, because if the law is ambiguous, it must be interpreted on the side of the citizen, because it wasn't the citizen that was in error of writing the law being ambiguous. So he said, and we brought him to Australia, and he went on national ABC radio, and he pointed out that this was a constitutional matter, and the lawyers in Australia were at fault by trying to solve it under the law. And that was interesting, that we really won the case by using the Australian Constitution, because he said, if it's a civilised country and the law's ambiguous, you're the citizen, you've got to win. And that's what I did. So the Taxation Department welcomed me back as a happy little taxpayer, and that's what I've been ever since. And having come back, and then I've moved on to the other part of the book, where I started a mining company and employed a lot of people. We produced a lot of gold, and that's the chapters that are involved in the nickel boom. And the other chapter, that's chapter 8, the nickel boom, covers the beginning and the end and the outcomes of all the nickel exploration that happened. And then moving on to chapter 9 was the gold industry, how it came back from nowhere. It came back from the dead and has created so much wealth. Then the last book, part 4, is turning some of the money that I generated from mining back into the world of ideas. So I said, we've turned ideas into gold. That was by using science and technology to produce gold. Having produced the gold, I've reinvested the gold, and that's the subtitle, Turning Ideas into Gold, and then gold back into ideas. We've used the proceeds from my mining endeavours back to generating. We've generated now, and some of them are on the front page of the book, we've through our Mancal Foundation, and Mancal just stands for Manus Kalgoorlie. That's where we got the name Mancal. We've sent now over 2,000 very bright young Western Australians to economic opportunities all over the world. Many of them have remained in the countries where we sent them to work within economic think tanks, and they've developed very successful careers in other parts of the world. But that's what I call, we made ideas into gold for a start. First half of the book. Second half of the book was reinvesting in the world of ideas and allowing young people to open the horizons and open their eyes to the world's opportunities to which I've been exposed.
Can you explain to me the cover of the book, because it seems to have a fascinating photo on the cover?
Well, these are the young people we at our Mankell Foundation sponsored to a conference in Sydney about nearly 2 years ago. It was called the Friedman Conference. And there was a photographer there he saw me with, and we've got the rest of our Mankell team there, but he saw me with all these students and he said, "Hey, bring them all together. You're such a happy bunch of intelligent young people. We want a photo capturing all your enthusiasm." And we did. It was a very spontaneous photograph. They all fell together in the one place. He took a photo and that's it. And I've used it on the cover because our whole idea about economics is the spontaneous activity from all the wisdom of individuals coming together in control of their own destiny and making their own decisions. And I think that photo summarises in pictorial form exactly our thoughts of developing independence and self-reliance in young people. And most of the people, we're still in touch with these young people, and it just symbolises. And I say, it's called the Lonely Libertarian. Why lonely? How could I be lonely? There I am in the middle of all these bright young people. How could I be lonely? But they're all libertarians like me. And anyone who is self-sufficient and thinks for themselves and speaks up about it has got a chance of having their head kicked in at the moment in ultra-politically correct Australia. And having had their head kicked in, that's when you feel extremely lonely. So these young people know what I mean when I talk about the lonely libertarian, because they've all experienced from time to time being able to speak about some of these ideas at their universities is something of heresy.
And it's interesting that we are all at the NewGenGold conference, and we're talking about libertarian because
new generation,
and just about every libertarian is a gold bug.
They're gold bugs, and they understand Bitcoin. They understand cyber security. They understand the new generation of young people. I call them digital nomads, because they're able to operate companies in other parts of the world. They're able to exchange. They use transfer wires for transferring money back and forth for international commerce, and it's a total sense of independence, and it's a good feeling to be independent, to make your own decisions about your own life.
There was another photo you showed me in the book, I think with you and somebody else.
That's a photo of where I'm with Andrei Eleonarov. He was Putin's former economic advisor.
You mean President Putin
President
of Russia?
Putin of Russia, yep. I think one of the most amazing things that's ever happened in my life was in September 1990, when I was chosen to be part of a group of 40 people that were sent to Russia to explain to Russians. It was called the Transition to Freedom seminar there. We were sent to Russia to train the Russians on how to handle free enterprise, because it was due to arrive any minute. Well, little did we know that it was arriving the very week that we were there. And the title of that chapter that I've written is The 7 Days That Shook the World. It was the 7 days that it took for communism to completely collapse in the former Soviet Union. We were there in the week when they were tearing down statues, when they were burning flags, they were smashing shops, they were changed the name from Leningrad to St. Petersburg. All this was happening, and we were there giving lectures on how to handle free enterprise. Each of us had a specialty. There were mainly academics, a lot of Nobel Prize winning economists, but there was also some business people like myself. My challenge was to explain to the Russians, now that they had the ability to, they could go out and form a company. So I had to explain how you formed a company. You know, we know in Australia, we know how to form a company because we do it. But it hadn't been done in Russia since 1917. So there was this complete vacuum on how to raise capital, how to form a vision of what you wanted the company to do, then present that vision to other people and get maybe 500 people to become shareholders of a company, and then form corporate governance to give trust so the company can move forward, and if you were successful, they would benefit as shareholders. At the end of one of my talks, I had a Russian guy come up to me, a big guy. He grabbed me by the arm and he shook me. He said, "I don't know anyone in the world I would trust enough to give my money to." And I realised what a challenge. There'd been no trust. There'd been no ability to invest in anyone because they didn't trust anyone. So we realised what a huge job we had training the Russians on how to handle free enterprise. It's been interesting, and it's taken me 30 years to complete my report on the Russian visit, which has brought back so many happy memories.
That is wonderful to hear. That is wonderful to hear. So tell me, in the end, this book is easily an industry Bible. Why is that the case?
It's interesting. It was called the Industry Bible at a book launch we had in Sydney, but it captures in that one chapter the essence of this nickel boom. Now, it's hard to imagine. Until 1966, we didn't even know how to spell the word nickel. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but there was no nickel industry. Then there was an amazing discovery by Western Mining Corporation, and out of that has come an entire nickel industry. And that story has been captured in Chapter 8 by a first-hand witness like myself, a witness and a participant in the industry on an ongoing basis. Then the nickel industry by about 1972, 73 was on the wane because the production had come back into balance. It was no longer scarce. And then we were all over-geared. We had all over-invested in the industry. And then fortunately we were rescued by gold re-emerging when the Arabs had made so much money out of the 1974, the quadrupling of the price of oil, that they invested. They'd said they'd got enough US dollars, let's buy some gold. They bought some gold, rocketed the price of gold. There wasn't enough gold to go around, and the gold boom that came out of that era rescued the rest of us explorers who were running out of puff on the nickel side, and we were into the gold boom. So that's Chapter 9. The following chapter, Chapter 9, covers the re-emergence or the renaissance of our wonderful gold industry, which had died during that long period where the gold price was fixed by government control.
So ultimately, what do you hope would be or should be the impact of this book in the context of your own legacy?
I think the context of it is never give up. We're at the beginning of a whole new era where we've got all these modern technologies to re-explore at greater depth. We've only touched the very surface of our very old, very heavily weathered countryside around Australia. It's a very, very old geological country covered with sand. We can penetrate that. There's some amazing discoveries to be made, but also to think in terms to learn from the great companies such as Western Mining, who were multi-mineral. They were using the proceeds from gold to generate capital to go searching for nickel, and then from nickel to go searching for bauxite, and then started the aluminium industry. And I think we've got to think in terms of, and now it's lithium is such a big thing, and cobalt is coming. We've got to think of ourselves as a multi-mineral commodity and keep our eyes open while we're exploring for one mineral, be looking for others, and then if we find others with that the market is not right, store the data, because that will be invaluable when the price of that particular commodity pops. The prizes will go to those who are in readiness. They have the data and they're ready to pounce and bring something into production when it's needed, not to start looking for something and then start a cycle, because if they start looking when the commodity is needed, they'll be into production too late. So be ready. It's the old Boy Scouts thing. Be prepared.
Ron Manis, if it were possible, you as a person could be turned into a library, but as it is not, I'm sure most people will be thankful to you that you've written these books to tell the story, and it will occupy an important part in most libraries. It's a pleasure talking to you, Ron Manis.
A pleasure too, Philip. Thank you.
And that was the thoughtful conversation here on AfricanPod Business Forum with Ron Manis, an octogenarian and a legend in Australian mining industry. I am Philip Nyakbo, your host, and AfricanPod Business Forum is produced by AfricanPod from Perth, the Silicon Valley of mining, energy, and business. Subscribe now so you don't miss any episode of AfricanPod Business Forum for thoughtful business conversations.